the guy that we have there who's doing a service to the town, trying to watch out for safety issues, cleaning, taking the trash out and addressing any maintenance issues. I think asking him to then be a policeman, quote unquote, don't mean to use that word figuratively, or literally, but asking him to write fines could put him in jeopardy and would be unfair. So I think that perhaps we need to give some thought to a different enforcement item too. So those are my two comments on it.
Thank you. Councilwoman Lewis?
I think this is a really good idea. I think having a day use permit is something that is going to help our park be a safer park, a cleaner park, and I think that having the event coordinator on staff now that we've hired as a contract person is a really good step. I tend to agree with Councilmember Whitmer about the group size requirements of less than 10. It may be, I'm not sure, 15, but I was thinking more along the lines of 12, and then less than 50 to remain the same. One of the things that I feel is that we don't need to reduce the fees. I think the $100 fee is something that really is reasonable for a large group, especially if there's 12 people up to 50. I mean, it comes out down to be less than $10 a person at $100. And to residents, non-residents, I just think that it, get into class system, but I think a flat $100 fee. And then we've got the fine of $100. That seems, in line with if you don't have a permit, then it's going to cost you $100, and you pay your permit and you're fine. And then it's not a fine; it's that here you've got you don't have a permit, so we do require permits. So there's an education process that has to happen. But I do believe that the $100 and flat for all park goers. I have a question about the alcohol, prohibiting alcohol. Do we currently prohibit alcohol?
Currently, the park use requirements that we hand out to people says day use permits and picnic areas, they're not allowed to use alcohol.
It's day use.
Day use,
right.
Because you're allowed to use alcohol
events.
In events.
Yeah.
And I know that, I don't know, I think that I've been to a large picnic many years ago. And
Yeah,
a long time ago.
It's intended to discourage that kind of transient activity that comes through with alcohol in the park.
Don't cider.
Cider? Cider?
Oh, I would take it.
Cider. Hard cider.
I thought we were talking about apple cider. The Council,
Anyway.
Vice Mayor Dubois.
Yeah.
Do you have familiarity with how this was managed prior to January 2012?
It was managed through the parks.
No, I understand. And what about with respect to the size of groups and the fee, the day use permit fee and the fine? How well did that work?
I don't have the issue. Did Steve give you that, Mike?
No, but what he did say is that the sense I got is that the actual fining never really took place.
Yeah.
I mean, rather than it becoming a confrontational thing, if there was uncooperative park users, then our staff would just contact the police department, who would then go to the park and handle the situation.
Yeah.
And it's not a fine in the sense of a criminal fine. It's a administrative citation, and the base amount of a penalty under the admin citation program is $100. And so that would be on top of any park fee that they would then have to get.
I don't know, I think there should be some kind of a phase-in period, to give people some time to, get used to it. And you kind of have a warning for the first time, and you say, so we're going to waive the fee, but you can pay we're going to waive the fine, but just pay your fee and have a good time.
Fines are always discretionary. They don't have to be done, and nobody is suggesting that the person there on the weekend become a police officer of sorts. This is more in the nature of code enforcement, and if they needed to, a police officer could be called, get the name of the person,
Right.
and we can mail them an administrative citation. We don't have to have a confrontational problem.
It's not mandatory. Right. Vice Mayor DeGolia.
Well, I think the idea of a warning prior to the fine is a good idea. I think that addresses Bill's comments as well as Elizabeth's. With respect to the amount of the fee being changed from $100 to $50 for residents and $75 for non-residents, I think that one thing we often talk about is how much is the park used by residents versus non-residents, and we want to encourage resident use as much as possible. We do have a different fee structure for tennis keys. I don't have a problem with the concept of that. I wonder what the thinking is in terms of reducing the fee from what it had been.
We have a member of Parks and Rec this evening, perhaps.
Please.
Question?
Labor.
Rationale.
About, why did you reduce
Do you want
the,
to reduce the fees for residents?
No, the proposal is to, the fee had been, when we did the day use
Right.
permit prior to January 2012, $100.
Right.
And the proposal from the commission is to reduce it to $50 for residents, $75 for non-residents. So
Right.
just, what was the,
We were following the lead on the tennis key from the town council.
Great.
Thank you.
And doesn't the master fee schedule have something in here, and it does have two different fees? Well, I think it was a 30% markup, but I thought there were events in the park also included in the master fee schedule. I don't mean to jump ahead, but.
There was, and there's a differential between resident and non-resident in
Right,
terms of the overhead cost. This wasn't part of that fee
Okay,
schedule.
all right, sorry.
So, I think that personally, that the Baker's Dozen is a good group to have, and it's a 6 and 6. It's easier to count if we're counting. I kind of agree that if we go with a resident fee and a non-resident fee, it just, thank you, appreciate it. We do want to encourage more residents for utilizing the park, and we're going to be fine with that. And as we've already heard, I don't think that we're, out there really scaring people, writing out fines. I personally think the fine fee is low. If you've got a problem and it's a discretionary thing, we would only be issuing in essence, a permit breakage, permit fee, fine, if in fact somebody probably they earned it to some degree. So we don't go out and say, we probably would give them the warning and say, do you know that you're supposed to get? But there may be people that just get to a point where they earned a ticket. We're not walking in them, you walk into them, we're just trying to tell you what the rules of the road are. And I think that we could work with whoever it was to make sure that there's a discretionary period. This is what we desire as council. We don't want to see you out there with the ticket book writing everybody up. It's, we want to inform people. So this is just the foundation, and the protocol comes from you and how we adjust it in. So
can I just,
Please.
I just don't want to reduce the fee. I mean, if we're gonna have a two-tiered system, why don't we have because the fine is $100. That's the base that you can charge a fine for. And, the fee for day use is $100 for residents, and say $130 for non-residents, that kind of a thing. Because costs are going up, they're not going down. And the use of the park and day use, we now have somebody on site that we're paying for, and it's just, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me that if you've got a large group of 50 people, $100 for, play at the park is cheap.
Well, I agree. Well, first off, I agree with the Baker's Dozen because that's 13. Okay, so I do want to, and
We don't say the Baker's Dozen.
He did say Baker's
Yeah, well,
Dozen, he
that's
wanted
just because
Baker's
it's so
Dozen,
colloquial.
I even Googled it, I knew it was 13, and I thought, well, maybe I missed something.
Stop it.
I knew it was coming.
But anyway,
As the parliamentarian, I had already written down 13, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's good. So, but if we want to raise the rate from $50, fine. I do think maybe we should have a tiered structure. I agree with Councilwoman Lewis saying that, it could go all the way up to 50. Okay, so maybe you have a 25 and then above 25, it's a higher fee. I mean, we don't want to get too administrative with all these issues. We do need to cover the cost of putting the stands out there, so you know if you have something reserved and it's guaranteed that it's there for you. But I agree with the Vice Mayor. We want to get people to use the tennis courts, to use the park. And for quite a long time, residents stopped using the park. And this is hopefully the way to get them back into their park. They paid for the park. There should be a differential. But I think there's a valid point that if they have 50 people, I mean, they're really taking over the whole meadow, for example. There should be a little bit higher than if they're using two picnic tables.
Right? Vice Mayor DeGolia, any other comments?
I agree, we don't want to get too administrative. I mean, this is just enjoying the park on a weekend for a group that, we don't want somebody to have to go in at 5 in the morning and tie up 3 picnic tables like has been done. So I think the idea of day use permits is wise. I'm very comfortable to say if there's 1 to 12 that there's no fee. If it's 12 to 25, it's $50 for residents, 75 for non-residents. If it's 20, whatever, above 25 to 50, it's double that. It's $100 for residents and $150 for non-residents.
Did you get all that written down?
And your input, Councilwoman Lewis?
I just still think we're giving it away too inexpensively, and we're not covering our costs. And it's something that is going to be a convenience for the people wanting to use the park. There's going to be more security. It's we're providing the security, and I just hate going backwards in time. It doesn't make sense to me. But I'm not going to not
raise it next year.
We can raise it next year.
Well, why don't we?
Why don't we raise it right now? And I'll tell you, I've heard so many people say, oh, I can't, nobody can use the park, and there's so many people using the park, and now I'm hearing everybody's, well, we've got to reduce the prices so people will be encouraged to come use the park, And so I've heard over the years, same council people saying 2 different things. I think the park is a great asset. It's a wonderful asset for our residents and for our neighbors. And that's what we have to offer. And I don't think we should sell it too cheaply. We've got to cover our costs, I think.
So, seeing that we're going to try to cover our costs, we can come up with a tiering schedule and number of people schedule to really accomplish both. So maybe our fee will have a higher end than it currently has, but yet a lower end to still reach to, let's call it the baker's dozen. So
that doesn't include anybody that's 12 months or younger.
Right.
No, 12 months or younger, right. We could say 12 months or younger free, right?
There you go.
So I think that if we can come up with a reasonable fee pattern with incremental steps, but also having a higher range, this would cover our balance out. We're promoting the smaller crowds from using the park, and yet with our larger crowds, we get a larger fee for them because they take up the majority of the park, which prevents the smaller crowds from utilizing the park.
Well, and they cost more money to maintain and garbage and everything.
Absolutely. So if we can come up with a tiered schedule with, let's say, starting at the step of our baker's dozen at 50, then going up to,
how about 75 for our 12 and 12 to 25 and 100 for non-residents.
12 to 25,
At
you say
75.
75. And then our,
Non-residents would be 100, and then over that it would
I'm
be
sorry, One more time.
75 and 100 for 12,
Residents, and non-residents.
It's
And then-
13.
for 13 and up to
Gotcha.
25.
13,
13,
you're getting your
25.
13
I-
years.
0 to 12 is free.
Right.
Now you're saying 13
And up.
to 25
Right,
was
75.
75 and 100.
Right.
And then 25 to 50, do you have a,
150 to
yeah,
200.
just double
Yeah,
it.
That's great.
let's just double it, let's do that.
All right,
And-
soft touch the penalties for the phase-in period
Yes.
and evaluate new years.
Absolutely.
And you're gonna get this, because it wasn't in the write-up about the stands and all that, because you
Yeah.
have to be able to
Mark
reserve
it.
something.
Correct.
Now, everybody's comfortable with that?
Excellent.
Okay, do I have a motion on the table?
I moved.
So moved. Do I have a second?
Sure, I'll say.
And we didn't have any further discussion. No further discussion, let's call the motion. Call vote. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Did you see that? No opposed for us.
You'll see the fee resolution come back next month.
Please, thank you very much.
And hopefully it's right.
All right, we're gonna move, I'm sure everybody's waiting for item number 23, which is the discussion and direction with regards to contract staffing and agreements.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You have the staff report, and I'm not going to go through it in detail. I'm just going to give you the contract with my recommendation. For the city attorney, there's no action recommended. For the public works management, it's a current month-to-month contract. That's Mike and Gordon. My recommendation is we refine the scope of work for that contract to pick up a few things that are missing out there and then continue it. For the public works maintenance contract, those are the guys in the field, that's MCE. It terminates in June. My recommendation is to extend it for 2 more years and then consider rebidding it. Building life safety, same thing. It terminates in September. Recommendation extend 2 years. Code enforcement, that's the current month-to-month. My recommendation is we refine that model and we return to the city council in 6 months with how to do that, changing that model entirely. Planning services, it's current month-to-month. My recommendation is we refine that, update that contract. It's an older contract, doesn't have performance measures in there, we put those in it. The arborist contract, that's currently month-to-month. Recommendation is we refine the model, but return that in April for council's consideration for a totally different model. That's my recommendation.
Perfect, thank you, George. Any questions from council?
I'm good.
Just to clarify, your recommendation with respect to planning is to
Is to refine,
redo
redo
the
that
contract.
contract entirely, put in some performance measures, which are currently not in there. And Lisa and I have talked about a couple of those already, and then update that contract.
and would that be a new contract that would have a term?
Yes, it would.
And what was the proposal for the term?
We haven't worked that out yet, but that would come back to the council for approval.
Councilmember Whitner, any questions?
Sure, you say in the findings, I guess the question on the contract, you know, sometimes there's a need for expanding the scope and things like that. You know, if it was an employee, that, you know, you just say do it as part of your regular job, you know, that's what happens in the everyday world. But with the contract, if they may be able to throw the contract out, and that's true, but there are ways that you can handle that with specific contract terms and the services definition and specific sweep clauses. So I don't really see that issue should be a concern. What's more of a concern, I guess, as we go down the path with all of these contracts, and we made a conscious decision to start using contract labor. And we've brought in some very senior people that we perhaps couldn't have been able to afford. And so I think that one of the key things is that we need to be able to amend all of the contracts that allow us to have some sort of, if there's a turn of events that we're going to bring somebody in, that we have adequate exit management clauses and key skill clauses, so that if in fact there is a changeover, let's say, in the planning department, we can't just have a stop and a start. And so I'd like to, have further discussion, I guess, as we go into this, to really look at the structure of our agreements, because we are dependent, as you point out. Excellent point. We've got Gordon, we've got Mike, we've got Lisa, we've got Neil. Those guys are invaluable, and they're part of our business, but it can be handled contractually, and I think that, you know, my comment is that the comments here, it's kind of implied that maybe they wouldn't, but maybe I misinterpreted it. Also, I think that I'm a little concerned with, we've had a lot of these contracts for at least 3 years or more, and if there's not some sort of price review and benchmarking of the prices, you know, we don't know if we've got a good price. And so extensions are good, but there needs to be some sort of further analysis. The devil's in the detail with regards to that. And so when you say extend, were there any conditions associated with an extension along those lines to make sure we're getting value for money, or is it just, hey, same as?
No, those would be part of the discussions with those contracts. We would look at prices and things like that, or costs to do services, scopes of work, performance measures that might be missing that we've, you know, encountered. You know, the two that are terminating, building services and public works maintenance, for those are gonna be clear renegotiations of the contract.
Right, okay, because in the past, when we've talked about maybe changing a couple terms in an existing contract with an extension, our city attorney has said can't do that. And so
Depends on how it's written. If it's written so, in some contracts that I inherited, stated specifically that the contract was for a period of years, and then with options to extend at the then current rate for another year or 2 years. Those are now pretty much all gone.
okay.
And so, contract, the devil is in the details, and you can put pretty much anything in there that the vendor will agree to.
Yeah, just as long as we can modify some of the terms and put in things that perhaps are missing from the contracts. If we're doing extensions, when you say extension, to me, it's, yeah, but there's more qualitative stuff than just say the same as and just at the same price, or maybe have some CPI in there. That you know, I think that would be a disservice to the community.
Right, the intent is to take a careful look at those extensions and those contracts and make sure we're picking up things we need to pick up.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Whitmer, thank you for the question. That helps us. Any other questions from council? Seeing no other questions from council, I'm going to go ahead and open it for any public questions or comments, excuse me, on this topic, which is item number 23, which is...
There's public comments at the end, I want to speak there.
Soon. Please, John.
Regarding the contracts, now, only 2 of you people are on the board when these 2 gentlemen were contracted for their job. When do these contracts come up, the attorney and the town manager?
I'm sorry, John, this is just public comment, so questions...
No, it's not public comment. This is the same thing, you're talking about contracts, aren't you?
Yeah, but it's...
You can ask the question.
If you want to ask a question, go ahead, please. I mean, it's just meant to be public comment. So
They're both a little different. The city attorney's contract has an automatic renewal clause in it every year unless either of the parties decide 90 days ahead of the termination to open it back up. And there's probably a termination clause in the middle of it if the parties don't like what's going on. The city manager's contract was somewhat modeled on that, but it's different. And maybe you can, George, comment on.
I kind of work Tuesday or Wednesday to Wednesday, right? Every council meeting to every council meeting. It does have a termination provision within its severance provision for cause, but I basically serve at the pleasure of the council.
Right. But as I said before, I remember when we had 3 or 4 different attorneys, and only 50% of you people were here when these people were hired.
Right.
And they should be reevaluated occasionally,
Right.
good or bad.
Right.
Thank you.
No, thank you, John.
Yeah.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, we're going to go ahead and close the public comments, bring it back to council. Members of council, final remarks. Councilwoman Lewis.
I think this is something that we should do and take a look at all of our contracted service providers and update contracts and modernize them where they need to be updated and modernized. And I totally agree with Councilmember Whitmer that, you know, we need to make sure that we are getting the best value for the services and to take into consideration all of the services that are provided and the measurements of that. So the two that are really, I think, concerning to me, and I'm hopeful that staff can return to council sooner than the next 6 months for the code enforcement delivery. I think that is something that is a very important part of the safety and well-being of our town and residents, and we should take a good look at that. And so if staff could do that sooner than the next 6 months, I'd really appreciate that. And the arborist is another part, and you did say April.
Yes, that's coming back in April.
Okay, I didn't see that in the staff report, but maybe I missed
It's in the
that.
italics.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Public Works, I mean, planning contract, I just, I think we need to really evaluate the history and the intellectual property that is part of that service provider. So I think this is a good start.
Thank you, Councilwoman Lewis. Councilmember Whitmer, please.
I'm glad the city manager is doing this. You know, he and I have spoken a couple times with regards to this, more than a couple times. I think that all of our contracts need to be reviewed periodically, but care needs to be taken so that we don't lose the key skills that we're dependent on. So you know, every day of the week, we have some great guys that are here working. And they are involved in all of our businesses. So we need to really take a good look at the contracts, but also look at how we preserve the intellectual properties that they have and continuity of the work that they have so that we don't incur additional costs if in fact a termination of a contract is in place. And even if we choose to make that termination out of cycle, there needs to be some sort of exit management that provides us the service until we do a timely and efficient transition. So I do appreciate, George, you looking into this and getting the ball started on it. It is a long-term thing, but I think it's a very important thing, so I appreciate you doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Whitmer. Vice Mayor DeGolia.
I've also had extensive discussion with the city manager on exactly this topic and going through each of these subject areas. And I agree with your conclusions and recommendations. I think that the arborist services and the code enforcement services are services that we should look at managing in a different way. At least look at the possibility of doing that. I think that we have a greater need for arborist services in terms of time in the town, both in the right-of-way and in the park, and that it would serve the town to have more time spent on arborist matters, and I don't think we have to spend more money than we currently are. I think that with the other items, particularly planning and the leadership that we've had from Mike and Gordon on their subject areas has really benefited the town, and we want to protect and acknowledge the quality of the work that and the service that we've gotten. So I think looking at those contracts and I also think with the Public Works contracts, you know, we've had them for 2 years as contractors, and it takes time to understand how to manage the facility of this town. And I don't mean the administration building, I mean the roads, the park, the whole thing. And as you get people that learn that, we need to manage that so that it's a longer term engagement. So I agree with your recommendations.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm just going to make some very slight comments because I can echo everything everyone has said. I think that some of the things that that we see here with the contracts that we do have with the people, if you weren't doing a good job with us, you wouldn't be here. So the people that are here, we thank you for being here. We also want to be fair with the people we do have. So I think that those are some of the things that we're going to be looking at. We really do have to take a closer look at code enforcement, coming back with some options and what we can, let's say, deal with the amount of code-related issues that we do have, and our residents are demanding more. We increase the hours for code enforcement. We just need to start hearing some options because the name of the game is results. And so we want to see results in that department as well. And that's our goal. The arborist, you heard Vice Mayor Golia say, we have a lot of trees, we care about our trees, and you know, maybe we need somebody around more often. And maybe we need it to be spread out between people that are already here. I don't know, but I'd like to hear those options, and I would like to see George work with some options and bring it back to us. So thank you for taking the time to put this before us, and again, with the message of trying to be fair to everybody. And we thank everybody that is working with us and that has been serving us for the last year, and since some of you have started your contract, maybe even more than that. So we do thank you for that service. So I think that you've got plenty of direction on that particular item. We're going to go ahead and pull, well, the one item that Councilmember Whitmer pulled on the agenda, which was item number 13, before we go to the final. Councilmember Whitmer, please.
Sure. Couple questions, Chief, because we've looked at this this very subject several times, most recently with regards to some of the records destructions back in February 2012, which was item 13. Obviously, the situation at that time was substantially different than the one that we're facing today. You know, there were questions about activities and things like that, and you've done a superb job in keeping things moving forward, and really, you know, the department is a substantially different department than it was, you know, before you came here, definitely. But there's always a concern when records get destroyed, because once they're destroyed, they're gone. So I guess the question always was around employees that are currently on the payroll. And so are some of these records surviving with regards to officers that are still employed here or have been employed here less than 2 to 5 years?
I understand your concern, and at the sake of turning this into a study session real quick, I think it's important both for our citizens and the council to know that as a matter of policy and law, we investigate every complaint, every citizen's complaint, no matter how it comes in, whether it comes in the form of an email, whether I take a phone call at the desk or a citizen waves an officer down and lodges a complaint. And recently I just updated our citizens complaint form. It's on our website. We don't turn down anybody that wants to talk to us, that being said. Secondly, when you look at that, you have to understand is that whether it's a very minor incident, maybe a concern over operations, to a serious allegation, we're going to look into it. And what do we do when we look into it? We receive the complaint, we talk to the witnesses, the complainant, we review the VIEVU cameras, and we look at any evidence that might bear some light on whatever the allegations are. At the end of that, there are 4 determinations that could be made from that. 1, the incident is sustained. That means the allegations were proven as they were alleged. Number 2, not sustained. That means it was inconclusive or there was lack of information to sustain the allegations. 3, it could be exonerated, which means, yeah, the officer did what the allegations are, as stated, but they were legitimate, they were within policy, and they were legal. So it's exonerated. Or they could be unfounded. So when you look at that, you could be looking at unfounded complaints, exonerated complaints, not sustained complaints, or minor. or minor sustained complaints. The fact of the matter is, this is good policy for the chief of police to look at these. It's authorized under the law to be reviewed by our city attorney and destroyed. And we have gone kind of back and forth. You're absolutely right. When McKeith was on the council, there was discussions about that. But then back in February 2013, I submitted 18 police reports, 12 complaints, 12 of which were associated with current members of the department, and the council voted to have those destroyed. So I would hope at some point this would be a routine process. I'd bring these forward, we'd go through the approval process, and it would, the council would understand that this is best practices and something that should be done.
So with the categorization that you gave, and could you be specific? So how many of these are for people that are still on the force, and then in those categories, how many were on, or can you tell us off the top of your head, how many were unfounded, and how many were exonerated, and how many were in the other two categories where it was not sustained, either sustained or, well, I guess it wouldn't be taken off, but it was quasi in the gray area. You weren't really sure. Do you have that insight?
Well, you also have to remember that police officer files are protected under the government code. I don't want to get into a lot of detail. It'd be inappropriate.
You cannot divulge.
Yeah.
You cannot divulge. The only way you can get it is to file a pitches motion, which is why we primarily there's a 5-year, I want to call it a statute of limitations on usability of these documents. Pitches motions are routinely hated by police officers because that's a motion that's filed in a criminal matter to discover any negative comments or remarks that are in their personnel files. Requires a motion, requires justification, and it can't be stale. And the legislature picked 5 years as being stale. And that's why we look at anything after 5 years, and we want to get them out because it confuses the system if you don't. There are 2 sustained complaints in there. But the complaints that were sustained, one is for an employee that's long gone. The other is for an employee that's still here, but it was off-duty. Now, an off-duty comment, some courts might look at that and go, oh, I'm very liberal, I want to get anything that the poor criminal can use to bolster his case and get it thrown out on a technicality, I want to leave in there. So I'm going to divulge that information.